Welcome back to Financial Fortitude, where we help you build financial strength to weather life's storms and create a life worth leaving behind. I'm Michael Acosta.
And I'm Brady Hemmerly.
Let's start with a confession that I hear almost every week. I'm terrible at budgeting. Maybe you've downloaded the apps, built the spreadsheets, started strong on the first of the month, only to give up by the second week because life happened.
The good news, that doesn't necessarily mean you're bad with money. More often than not, it means you've been trying to use a budgeting system that just simply doesn't fit your life.
Exactly. A budget shouldn't feel like a financial prison. It should give you clarity, confidence, and permission to spend on the things that matter most. Today we're talking about why most budgets fail, how to build one you can actually stick to, and some practical budgeting hacks whether you're a student, raising a family, or enjoying retirement. Welcome to Financial Fortitude, a podcast for high earners, families, and business owners. We are your hosts, Michael Acosta
and Brady Hemmerly. Each week, we bring purpose-driven financial guidance to you so you can be assured you're on the right path. If you're looking to become an extraordinary wealth builder, let's dive in. Michael, I'm both excited, perhaps apprehensive about this episode because this is a topic that we speak on, I would say, almost daily. And it is typically the biggest, to use your medical analogy, it is oftentimes the biggest broken bone that brings a patient into our office and says, ouch, something hurts. It's usually the budget. So excited to work through it, but it's a challenging conversation always, most of the time at least.
Yeah, and I guess building off that medical analogy, it's the discomfort that's bringing somebody into the conversation, right? Into our office or into the Zoom waiting room to speak with us and consult with us. And it's, hey, I'm just not doing a good job at managing my cash flow. I need help with building a budget. And the reason why people think that this is the first starting point, which to some extent it might be, is because of what social media and the talking heads and, the apps and even the blog post writers lean into that, hey, in order to find financial success and financial independence, you have to have a strict budget. And if you've ever listened to our podcast episodes in the past, if this is your first time here, welcome. We're happy to have you here. But you'll learn that we look at budgeting, strict budgeting, a lot like strict dieting. Unless you're doing it because you're trying to hit personal goals or because you're getting ready for a competition for bodybuilding, whatever it might be, strict diets typically don't last long before you relapse, right? And even in most cases, a lot of diet programs will have you take time off from the diet program and then get back into it at a later date so that your body doesn't just become normalized to it. So I'm very curious to see what we're able to unravel today as we riff on this topic.
Yeah, so let's talk through it. I'd say, why is budgeting oftentimes the first stop in our financial journey? At least what I would consider is why there is because I would argue that the cash flow component of your balance sheet is essentially the fuel that makes everything else run, right? If I'm not earning an income or I don't have an income source of some kind, my life doesn't work. So once I have that income source, whether it's from person at work, me actually going and producing income, or whether it's from assets or portfolio at work, I only have a limited amount of cash flow. It's never going to be unlimited. So to make sure the rest of the system works, I have to ensure that I'm not spending more than I'm bringing in, at least on a consistent basis. So cash flow is typically where every client, where we as the practitioner are going to stop first because, hey, if this doesn't work or there's a major problem here, it's likely going to lead to other problems. But I would be curious, Michael, from your end, why do you feel, or from your observation, why do you think clients, individuals struggle with budgeting as much as they do? Why is it a consistent broken bone topic for us?
Yeah, I would say the reason why most individuals or households fail at the budgeting aspect is because they haven't defined a system that actually aligns with their life, their needs, and just overall optimization of how they manage cash flow. Society has taught us, and we've talked about this in past episodes, that we should be spending through automation, right? Set up the bill pays, set up the automatic subscription payments with credit cards, debit cards, whatever, right? As we've continued to move more towards digital banking and away from paying for things with cash or a debit card, it's become much more difficult to reconcile what we actually have in the bank versus what we've spent from a behavioral standpoint. So because the balancing of the quote unquote checkbook has fallen by the wayside, and it's less tangible, more people are leaning on automation, but the automation is being applied in the wrong place. And this is a flaw in the system that's been built for the cash flow management of the household. Because for one reason, the budget that we're building is honestly unrealistic, because what most households are striving for is a quote unquote perfect month. How many times have we been told that nothing in life is perfect? Right?
Pretty much every week, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, our biggest saying is don't let perfect become the enemy of good, right? So it's not that you need to have a perfect budget. You don't need to put yourself in a budgetary prison, right? But you need to be realistic and transparent and honest with yourself, right? I like to think of your cash flow domain on your balance sheet or just your cash flow management as the calories that you're putting into your body. If you're not putting the right amount of calories in your body, then your balance sheet in itself, the things that you own in your assets and the things that you owe as your liabilities, are ultimately going to become imbalanced, right? And that's effectively your digestive system. The things that you're putting in your body are not going to be processed appropriately, right? Which could lead to other issues physically, medically for yourself. So just recognize what real life looks like. What all is included in real life? Car repairs, kids' activities if you have children, birthday gifts, vacations, gifts for Christmas and other holidays, medical bills that arise, right? The list can go on and on and on, needing a new HVAC, right? Whatever it might be. So if we're not acknowledging these, even if they're one-off, once a quarter, once every 6 months, like we still need to include that in the budget, but I am less focused on getting the budget down to the penny each month and more focused on, do we have the right system in place to empower us to be able to be successful month over month with being able to save money?
Yeah, and what I'd add to that, using the dieting or the calories in an analogy, is why do people struggle a lot with budgets? It's because it's work, right? Like life gets busy, life gets messy, and if I want to stay on a really strict diet, I've got to work really hard to make sure that every meal is perfect. And in the budgeting world, I've got to sit down every single week and balance my checkbook or reconcile all of the expenses that I've had. Now, some people, few and far between that we generally speak to, some people really love doing that. It's part of their weekly or daily routine. I'd say the large majority of people, the last place they want to spend their hour of free time a day is reconciling their budget on a Sunday afternoon. So I think just as much as it's a system problem, we've automated spending rather than saving. It's just as much a natural human tendency to, I don't want to spend a ton of time on something, right? If I only have a limited source of it.
So let's riff on that a little bit, because I like what you said there, that for some people who do this very, very well and who are very disciplined and diligent with tracking every single penny, they have an element of time, and you can't emphasize that enough, that they're willing to dedicate towards this. Now, others are relying on quicker fixes, is how I would put it. Leveraging apps. We get asked nonstop, what is the best budgeting app that we should use? And so we didn't do extensive research on this. I myself have signed up for Monarch Money because I got so many questions around it that I wanted to try it. And I'm happy to give my opinion of the matter with it. But some of the most commonly used budgeting apps out there, according to NerdWallet, are going to be Monarch Money, YNAB, which stands for You Need a Budget, Rocket Money, Quicken Simplify, Copilot Money, and Every Dollar. Now, not to age myself, I used to use Mint.com before that was acquired by Credit Karma because it was free. The downside was that it was very spammy. You got a ton of ads. Same thing with Credit Karma, in my opinion. But in utilizing Monarch Money, one, the aggregation system is pretty strong, but with any aggregation system, there's going to be flaws. The open API that's used between the app and the institutions that you're linking to get data aren't always available for every institution. The links break whenever security parameters change on either end, whether it's at the institutional end or the consumer end. And I feel as though it creates an unnecessary sense of anxiety or urgency when I've blown up my budget for the month.
So
right?
expand on that, because I think that's really the rub point for a lot of people. A lot of our clients have these apps and say, I don't like them, or like, I don't think it's working. Why?
Yeah. Or it's so exciting at first that you're checking it daily. And so like you're really staying on top of it. But the moment you see that you're not having success, you become disengaged and you want to stop looking at it because it's pointing out imperfections, flaws, right? Well, with Monarch Money, it will basically account for what your average monthly spending is over a specific period of time based on what's aggregating into the system, your credit card, your bank accounts, whatever. So good data in will produce good data out. But what is it really showing you? It's just showing you your monthly spend. But if you have a month where your HVAC is needing some maintenance and you pay, let's just say $5,000 to have it fixed because something's gone wrong that is very costly, well, that's not accounted for in your budget because it wasn't in the original data. So what does it tell you? It tells you that you overspent by $5,000. What does that do to you psychologically and behaviorally?
It's just losses. They pile up, and it happens frequently because life changes frequently.
Yeah, and psychologically, it's known that losses are felt at a higher multiple of discomfort versus wins providing a higher multiple of satisfaction. Right? We are designed as humans to feel extra pain when it comes to losses or whenever there's danger. So I think that's where my opinion of the matter is, hey, it can help get organized. It can help to provide base level foundational insights and analytics, but I wouldn't keep yourself beholden to it month over month unless you just absolutely love that level of pain month to month.
So we've identified, hey, budgets are hard to do from a time and an effort perspective. And we've identified that from a system standpoint, there's not a lot of real automation or organization that happens outside of spending and then just watching or reconciling what that spending looks like at the end of the month. So as we jump into solutions or ideas for listeners, I think most of the solution that we'll talk through is how do we reverse engineer, or I would say systematize, this budgeting effort to make things easier from a reward standpoint, to make things easier from a time management standpoint, and to make things easier from, I would say, building block over block on top of each other. So we're not going to jump right into exactly how the system works. I think where we're headed first is, hey, we can't implement a system without doing some of the basic baby steps first to actually understand where we need to start. But we'll walk through all of that. So, Michael, I'm the client. I come to you and say, I'm having trouble budgeting. I've been on Monarch Money for the last 3 to 6 months. I haven't really seen any progress. I know I am making enough money to save and feel like I should be doing a better job. I'm lost on how I begin to accomplish, even where to start, let alone building upon that effort month over month.
Yeah, I would say the first thing that we're going to start is identifying with, well, what are you earning each month as a household or as an individual? What is the amount of cash flow that's coming in? And the reason why I start there, which sounds a little odd, is because I want to be able to identify and set a benchmark for how much money we should be saving. Now, this flips the script on its head because the question was, well, how do I build a budget? I feel like I'm spending too much, but I'm coming off as though I'm not hearing you and saying, hey, we need to focus on how much are you saving? All right, so we're going to reverse engineer this equation. I'm earning as a household $250,000. The goal on the high end should be to save at an extraordinary wealth building rate of 20%, $50,000 a year in totality. Okay. So we know that that's our benchmark. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to hit our benchmark in day one, but it's at least giving us a metric to aim for. So now we say, okay, we know what our savings target is. Society has taught us that we spend first, save second at the end of the month. So because we've flipped the question from how much do I get to spend to how much should I be saving before I spend, now we can start to work through the last 3 to 6 months of average spend for lifestyle to identify a monthly average across that period of time. Again, we want good back data, right? 3 months to 6 months, in my opinion. The reason why we're using, in my mind, 6 months is because I want to be able to account for certain seasons of life where there were vacations, where there were changes in the seasons if you own a home because there's extra maintenance that takes place with your HVAC and other things in the home. Maybe you had to replace your tires on your car, right? Maybe it was the holidays and you have a large family and you're, very charitable with your gifts to either organizations or your nieces and nephews and your parents and siblings. We want to be able to account for all that. So once we have that data of that monthly average, now we can start to think about integrating the appropriate system through automation so that you start to have success with your budget that you've created.
So let's pause there. I'd say step one, from what I'm understanding you sharing, is we've got to understand the input first. We have to understand how much income are we making on paper, and then we also have to understand how much income is actually hitting our bank account twice a month, bi-weekly, once a month. I think more people than not would not enjoy admitting they have no idea what their actual pay stub number is.
Right.
It might be the same every 2 weeks, but like I really don't know how much it is.
It's pretty daunting of the number of times we meet with someone and they're just unaware of what's being withheld from their paycheck, what's hitting what amount of gross revenue they actually earned before all the deductions. Like, it's pretty daunting.
And so step one is just, what is the input up top? What is the input that's actually hitting our bank? Step two is, let's get a rolling framework of what our average spend is now. So that way we can use that data in at least building the first iteration of the system. I think the analogy I like to use here is, hey, if I'm going and beginning a workout plan, I want to run through a series of exercises to say, here's where my start looks like, my starting strength, my starting speed, my starting flexibility, right? So I know on day one, this is what things look like. And so as I'm building the right system, I'm building the right workout plan to actually make this work, it's easy for me to say, here's where I started, here is the progress that I'm making, and here ideally would be where challenges or headwinds are coming from. So with that in mind, we've got our inputs, we've got our baseline. Now the next thought is the system itself, right? We're flipping the spending, saving idea on its head. Talk to us about what this actually looks like from an organization and implementation standpoint. It sounds great, but how does it work?
Yeah, I think this is where we can really start to find success almost effective immediately, right? In many instances, maybe not in all, but in many instances. Because what we're ultimately going to end up with is removing what most people's natural habits are of spending what's available to the automation effect of removing the needs for constant willpower, right? Because willpower can be broken. Discipline can fail. So how do we do this? Well, we're going to establish what's known as a wealth coordination account. Okay, WCA can be the acronym here. Doesn't matter where this is set up at. Does not have to have the highest interest rate. Can be a high yield savings account. You typically want something that's not going to have a limitation on transactions coming out of the account on a recurring basis, okay? Because you don't want to be penalized. So let's just say it's a checking account where you bank, an extra checking account. The non-negotiable here, though, is that you do not want any bill pays coming out of this account, okay? This is purely just a holding tank. It's just a hub for all your sources of income to go into it. Now, because we've averaged out the last 3 to 6 months of your lifestyle need, we now understand what your average spend rate looks like. Let's say that it's a traditional household, husband and wife, and they're bringing combined $18,000 a month, right? After employee deductions for benefits, taxes, all that. $18,000 come in. Well, because they have children, because they own a home, because they have all of these expenses, they're spending about $13,000 a month, okay? Now, $18,000 flowed into the wealth coordination account. They are now going to pay themselves out of that wealth coordination account $13,000. All right. Now, they can decide how they want that money to move from the wealth coordination account into their original spending account, which is just their primary checking, where they pay most of their bills. Okay.
So what you mean there is I can get a check once a week, like a personal paycheck in quotation marks is what I often say. I can get a personal paycheck once a week. I can get it every other week. I can get it once a month, like however you typically manage the money that's sitting in your spend account.
Yeah. And the only thing that you have to identify here is that if you want $15,000 a month on average, if you're going to pay yourself weekly, then you're moving, let's call it $3,461 a week from the wealth coordination account into your household checking account where you pay your bills.
Now, your example, 18 went down to 13.
Correct. So if you're planning on paying yourself on average for your lifestyle $13,000 per month, and you want that to be averaged out over 52 weeks, then you would effectively take $156,000 a year and divide it by 52 weeks. That means that you should be moving $3,000 a week from your wealth coordination account into your primary checking account where you pay your bills. Okay? So with that being said, we go through the first month. $18,000 comes in. You and your partner, spouse figure out how you're going to move the $13,000 over from your wealth coordination account to your checking, whatever frequency. Like you said, Brady, weekly, bi-weekly, meaning every other week, semi-monthly, meaning the 1st and the 15th, or just monthly. Totally up to you. At the end of that month, using simple math, how much money should be left over in that wealth coordination account?
It should be $5,000.
$5,000, exactly. Okay. Now, we're not quite at the point where we want to start saying, what do we do with this $5,000? Okay. Right now, it's just a backstop. Because we had 1 month of success does not mean we're going to have success every single month. So let's run through it a second month. Another $18,000 come in. Okay, there was already $5,000 in there, so now I'm at $23,000. Behavior would tell us traditionally without the system, hey, I have extra money, I can go spend more. But pause, you're going to do the Heisman on that. You're going to punch it in its face, and you're going to say, hey, no, we're living off $13,000. So you move your $13,000 again based on whatever frequency you've set up from your wealth coordination account to your spending checking account. You found success the second month. Now how much money do you have left over in that wealth coordination account?
10, right? 5 times 2.
Yeah. So let's say the third month comes. Same concept. $18,000 comes in. You're committed to living off $13,000. You get to the end of the month. You think you're about to get it 3 months in a row, but you had a $2,000 unexpected expense. Guess what? Not problematic. You still made it through the month with $3,000 left over. Now you have $13,000 in this wealth coordination account. Okay. So the system is working. Why is it working? Because you've removed the demand for constant willpower. It's just organically saving excess cash. Now, where this is even stronger is for the individuals who were already having success, but they had no protocol or system for floating cash that was just sitting in their checking account. So this is where we're going to start to get into how much should you be keeping in your checking account from a spending perspective at all time? And then how do we start to build your backstop known as an emergency fund or a sinking fund?
Okay. So to expand on this, the example that you provided, $18,000 is coming in, $13,000 is going out. On normal months, I'm going to consume the $13,000 that I send myself, and I'm going to capture the $5,000 in surplus. And I'm going to do that month after month after month. And again, surprises may come up. We'll get into that. But Michael, what happens if I know $18,000 a month is coming in, and I've run through the last 3 to 6 months worth of my expenses, and the rolling average spending instead of $13,000 a month is pretty darn close to 18. I'm not seeing a lot of excess just laying around from my numbers. What's the approach or the thought there?
Yeah, I would say this is where we have to dedicate a little bit more forensic accounting auditing and where things are going. And so traditionally, this is where you would start to comb through your monthly expenditures and start to categorize them into 2 primary categories. Needs, or the more formal title of non-discretionary, and then wants or desirables with the more formal terminology of discretionary. And what we want to do is we want to start to filter through the discretionary spending, the things that are not a necessity to life, but are offering additional comforts above and beyond what we actually need. And if there's anything that can be compressed or removed, right? A lot of people sign up for subscriptions that they're never even using, right? That's one of the big mantras with Rocket Money. There's ads out there and, there's a guy, he's interviewing someone and says, hey, I'll give you this, that, or the other if you can tell me what you're paying for in subscriptions each month. So again, that can be an easy way of going and finding extra cash. The other way could be just analyzing your pay stub and saying, okay, what am I opting into by way of benefit elections? Am I being inefficient with how I'm contributing to my retirement account, meaning that I'm overfunding my retirement above and beyond whatever the match is from my employer? And that's leaving less discretionary cash flow that can flow through to my checking account for me to build and save and invest in other ways on my balance sheet.
Got it.
So that would be the starting point in my mind.
Yeah, so thought is you basically have 2 options. Can I increase my input, money flowing in, by making things more efficient at the top? Or can I decrease my output, money flowing out, by making things more efficient towards the bottom? Now, is that necessary or required every week? Perhaps very early in setting the system up just to get to a point where you are consistently capturing money in the system. But I would say once the system's set up, we're making 18, we're spending 13, we're capturing $5,000, right? If that's our bogey or our landmark from a capture standpoint and we're hitting that, not nearly as much audit has to happen every week. It's just happening automatically for us.
Correct. And I think one of the hard things as a financial advisor is when someone comes to you and says, I know we're making good money, but we're also spending a lot. Life has just become so expensive. What should an average monthly spend rate be for a family this size? Or what should an average grocery bill be for a family this size? And to be honest with you, there's no rule of thumb there, right? It's purely up to the discretion of the household. What are you guys going through? Do you have dietary needs, right? Now, in some cases, it could be that you're just spending frivolously. And because the system's not in place, because you have floating cash, excess cash in your checking account based on the system you have now, you're just not able to get out of your own way. So I think by reverse engineering it, putting the wealth coordination account in play, having that surge protector between your income flowing into your world and your expenses being applied through automation, you can start to see wealth accrue and accumulate on your balance sheet. So now I think what's important is setting the framework for how much cash you should be keeping in your checking account where you spend your bills, as well as what do we think is an appropriate emergency fund for risk-free cash on hand.
So before we jump into actually funding the system, one more question here. As you mentioned, hey, everyone's life is going to look different based on what's important, what your family looks like, what needs that you have, etc. Let's say I have $18,000 coming in. I have $17,000 coming out, right? My spread is pretty small. I'd love to capture $5,000 a month. I'm only capturing $1,000 a month. I've combed through my inputs. There's not much improvement to be made there. And I've combed through my outputs. There's not as much discretionary, truly lifestyle expenses that can be trimmed. So a lot of my life is non-discretionary must-haves or needs. So I'd love to get to $3,000 a month, $4,000 a month, $5,000 a month, but I can only capture $1,000 a month. What does the system allow for if I can't make that immediate improvement by actually combing through things? How does the system help that problem or challenge?
I would say that the system helps improve upon that because over time, through different seasons, you will see your inputs shift, whether you're getting a raise, right? If you get a 3% or 5% raise, we've already created the system that's going to capture that raise. So what are we doing? We're curbing lifestyle creep. If you're an individual who earns over, let's just say $200,000 or $250,000 in a given year, you're going to exceed the Social Security wage cap of $184,500. Well, once you've hit that, just like we talked about in episode 47, the hidden raise high earners miss every year, Social Security tax is going to stop being withheld on every dollar earned above the current IRS limit of $184,500. That's 6.2% in taxes going to Social Security that you're getting effectively a 6.2% raise on the surface level. So all of that's going to be organically captured in that wealth coordination account. If your income is set up in a way to where monthly there's less discretionary spending because your base salary is right above your monthly need, but you get incentive compensation on a quarterly, semi-annual, or annual basis, this wealth coordination account is going to automatically capture that excess. So in theory, just by having the system in place, when there is opportunities for extra income, extra cash flow, it's organically captured. You're not really having to think about it. The different energy towards thinking is applied towards where should I be putting this excess now that I have it, not how do I capture it.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that's like the light at the end of the tunnel for individuals who have designed a lifestyle, a lot of needs-based expenses that looks and feels very close to their income. It's not an immediate solution, but time is really your greatest weapon. Over time, you will get raises, you will get promotions, you may receive incentive comp, you will have opportunities to capture extra money. But if you're not diligent enough to do that on your own, the system does it for you. And I think this is something we see pretty often. Hey, I'm making $200,000 a year. I just got a job offer. I'm making $250,000 now. Cool. Well, your lifestyle is not changing because your personal paycheck hasn't been adjusted. But that extra $50,000 is being captured, right, as it flows through the paycheck. So, well, let's jump in. I know we've been delaying it a little bit. Let's jump in. We understand the framework of the system, where the benefits are. How do we fund it? Like what needs to go in place to make this thing work?
So basically, our guidelines or our rules of thumb here are that at any given moment, you should really only be keeping about 1 to 1.5 months worth of lifestyle spend in your checking account at all times. Now, the reason why we set this benchmark or this ceiling is because if you were accustomed to, let's just say using your example, Brady, where there's very little margin, 18,000 comes in, 17,000 is being moved over from wealth coordination to our spending account. But over time, based on a new season of life, your spending has just organically gone down to $15,000. Well, if you get to the end of the month and you're used to only keeping, 1 month's worth of lifestyle in your checking account, but you recognize that at the end of the month that you have extra money left over, that means that you had a month where not only did you save organically in the wealth coordination account, but now you have excess cash in the checking. That's an easy way to take that quote unquote floating cash and move it back to your wealth coordination account or move it over to an emergency fund or just reduce what you're moving over that month from a lifestyle spend perspective based on the difference, right? You don't need to overcomplicate it, but what we're starting to see is the attribute of you finding success, creating more wellness awareness around your spending habits, and seeing improved upon outputs for discretionary cash flow that you could put back into your world to the highest and best use. Now, we also need a backstop because, again, life happens. You need to have an emergency fund. And I would say funding a healthy emergency fund is more important than aggressively funding your Roth IRA and your 401k, in my opinion, because it's more accessible, it's not exposed to unnecessary risk, and it's dependable. It's there for you. It's there to protect. That's why we call it an emergency fund, right? The CFP board recommends that for a dual income household, 3 months minimum worth of risk-free cash in an emergency fund. For a single income household, because there's more risk if that breadwinner loses their job, they should have closer to 6 months worth of lifestyle in risk-free cash. So that at least gives you a baseline of saying, okay, hey, I need to at least keep no more than 1 month to 1.5 months worth of lifestyle spend in a checking account at all time. 2, we need to get to a point where we have 3 to 6 months worth of lifestyle need in an emergency fund, risk-free cash, right? Whether it's a high yield savings account or a low yielding savings account is irrelevant in my mind. Yes, it's great to have the high yield savings account because you're going to get some attractive interest rates, right? And so you're just going to see this accumulate over time and accrue over time to help your efforts in building that up. But don't waste brain power on it, right? Don't get analysis paralysis and trying to find the perfect high yield savings account. Just make sure it's money that's in a place that can be safe from market exposures and risk.
Now, when you say 3 months or 6 months or whatever that number is, just to clarify, that's a lifestyle spend.
Correct.
That is not gross income, correct?
Correct.
So in our example, it's 3 times 13 or 6 times 13. It's
Correct.
not 6 times 18 or 3 times 18.
Correct. And the reason why I say lifestyle spend is because if your job changes, right? If your income sources change, that figure is going to adjust. The other thing worth noting is that if one of the spouses loses their job, you're still going to have supplemental cash flow coming in from the other employed spouse if it's a dual income household. So you're not really going to need to replace the full $13,000 a month unless you're the only breadwinner. And one thing that can be a slippery slope that we haven't spoken about yet is that when it comes to budgeting, you can only cut your expenses so low, right? And it's a race to zero, but you technically can't get to zero because then you're going to be homeless on the side of the road, right? Because then you're eliminating rent, you're not eating, none of that, right? So you can't cut to zero. So a lot of people will behaviorally and psychologically get defeated when they start to go through eliminating, the discretionary expenses and there's only non-discretionary left. And it's like, hey, I don't have any other options. Well, your only other option is to find ways to increase the number that's flowing into your world. And I'm a big believer that we live in an economy in the US where there are opportunities for, side hustles. There's more than one way to generate additional income for your household. It's just a matter of what opportunities are you willing or able to take advantage of.
Got it. So what I'm hearing from you from a system standpoint, we're paying ourselves first in the high yield savings or separate account. We're sending ourselves a paycheck that we're essentially living off of that's covering all of our needs, but also the desires that we've built into our world. We're capturing the surplus on a regular basis. The goal is to keep 3 to 6 months is truly like a buffer or a safety net in that high yield savings. So in the event of a surprise or an unforeseen expense that we're not drowning in expenses. But the real key, at least that I'm hearing from you, is the money that's sitting in our checking account. Maybe 1 month's worth of lifestyle expenses or slightly more. If I use the workout analogy here, every month, right, the goal is to capture the money and it's happening automatically. But if I'm working out, I want to sweat, right? Like I don't want to end the month with 10,000 extra dollars and being like, man, that was so easy. Because that's where we begin to find that excess floating cash that tends not to have a job and gets spent somewhere else when we're not thinking. Now, I don't want to sweat so much that I pass out, right? I don't want to send myself $8,000 a month only to be like, wow, I overdrafted my checking account and I'm now paying fees or I'm now bailing myself out. As I want enough to sweat and to feel it as I'm working through the month, but not so little, like you said, that I'm going down to zero and just not living any form of lifestyle that I'm building or trying to design.
I would add one more caveat there in that don't allow a bad month to just completely derail the success that you're finding, right? If you can establish the system, the plumbing, and create the automation around it, even if everything that accrued in that wealth coordination account gets absorbed because of unexpected necessary expenses, then the plumbing still worked because at least it kept you from getting into credit card debt.
Yep.
Right? The funds were saved and set aside, right? It's when you're unable to save and now you're getting into credit card debt where this becomes a slippery slope and now the financial stress starts to become more heightened.
Up to this point, understand, hey, where do we get started when it comes to budgeting? How do we actually begin to get the framework designed? And then how do we actually build the system and put it in place? Now, you mentioned something earlier in the episode where it's hard to answer this question, but I'm going to ask you the hard question because these are questions that we get consistently. I'm going to come to you in 3 different phases. What should this system look like? What should our focus be on? Where should we be giving ourselves grace depending on what stage of life we're approaching this challenge and system in? And the 3 stages that I'll give you here is, I am a student, a resident, freshly graduated. I am in the very beginning stages of my career and earning, right? How should I approach this system or this challenge? 2, I am a mid-career professional. I've been working for 10 years. I've got a spouse. I've got a family. I've got the busyness of life. And then the 3rd person is I'm retired, right? Or at least nearing retirement. My career's on its downward end. I'm ready to sail off into the sunset. I'm actually not going to go to work anymore. I'm going to live off of the portfolio that I built. How does this system kind of address each different life stage here in your mind?
The system is universal, but the budget itself will never be universal, right? It's going to be different for everybody. Just like our immune systems are different and operate differently, our budgets are going to be different and they're going to operate differently, and our lifestyles are going to demand different things of us, right? So let's start with the young professional, right? Maybe it's a graduate student, maybe it's someone who just recently completed their training from residency or fellowship, or they're still in it. The idea here is that their lifestyle and their balance sheet haven't become overly complex yet, is the way that I view it. Well, they're at early stage of accumulation. This is probably the simplest time in your life when it comes to managing your finances, even though it may not feel like it, right? For many residents, for many early career young professionals, the feeling is, hey, I don't make a ton of money to be able to save a ton. That's not problematic because guess what? Even though you're at your lowest level of income, your income over time should only increase in theory. If you're doing the right things and you're making yourself marketable and you're taking advantage of what the economy and what the job markets offer, hey, you can scale your income up over time. Time is your biggest and greatest asset aside from your ability to earn income. So build the system, curb lifestyle creep through this system, and you will find success. Because if you think about someone who is on a strict diet, one of the best things that they do is they meal prep. They meal plan. Saturdays and Sundays, they're buying all their groceries, they're making their lunches, breakfast, and dinner for the week, and it's rinse and repeat. It's robotic. Do they deviate from that? Typically, no. That means they're not going out to eat with friends. They're not going out and having drinks or happy hour or anything with colleagues or family. They're just basically living in a bubble. Maybe a little extreme, and this isn't an attack to anyone who lives their life that way. I'm all about trying to curb decision-making fatigue, right? But the thing here is that we are not designed to live solely for a dollar. What do I mean by that? You deserve to make memories and enjoy life. And you can do that with this system. All your income's going into the wealth coordination account. You know what your lifestyle spend is for the month. If not, we can help you calculate it. And even if it's only $50 a month that's being accrued in that wealth coordination account, that is still a success. Guess what? In 1 or 2 years, when you get pay raises and you get incentive comp, that might now be $150 a month. Maybe it's $1,000 a month. Maybe it's $3,000 a month. Hey, guess what? You go from being single to getting married, which is going to lead us into the next phase. And now there's extra income coming in. Just because you add a spouse doesn't mean that your monthly living expenses just multiply by 2, right? Because you're going to replace some of the redundancies and the overlap of some of the things that you guys were spending money on. So again, I think setting the system early on creates the disciplined habits that allow you to find exponential success with saving and investing and becoming an extraordinary wealth builder a lot faster as you then move into the next tier.
Yeah, you're starting the whole process when there's not a lot of inputs and there's not a lot of outputs because your life is just not all that complex. It's much easier to set the system and get it up and running when there's just not that much to manage. Now, in this next stage of life where there's 100 different things to manage at any given time, it's harder to get started at that point. It's harder to work out or harder to get started on a diet plan when you've been binge eating or you have not been working out for months or years at a time. So let's jump into that next phase. Where's the focus or the priority there?
Yeah, well, I want to add one thing before we go into the next phase of the financial journey, right, or the career path journey. For those early career professionals or the residents and the fellows, I would say the big takeaways here are focus on starting your emergency fund so you have that backstop and flexibility with your decision making and spending power. Even if it's a small amount, it's very important. Try to curb lifestyle creep to the best of your abilities, especially if you go from earning very little and being overworked as a resident and fellow to now making 4, 5, 6, 7x what you were making while in training. If you can sustain a reasonable lifestyle spend rate, you will find exponential success in building wealth early on in your career once you make that transition. And the last thing is you don't need perfection, you just need consistency. So as long as you're finding the consistency with this system, you're going to find the success. It may not happen instantaneously, but it will happen over time. Now, as we transition into that next phase, okay, we're talking about getting married, starting a family, having kids. This is where things shift. The system does not change. The system stays steady and consistent. The only difference is that now you might have more income coming into the system and more money being moved from the wealth coordination account into the spend account. Now, why? Because there's just more demands of life. Now, when your children are younger, this is where it can be different for everyone. When you have newborns, if one spouse is going to exit the workforce to stay at home and help reduce the cost of childcare, well, 2 things are happening. You're going to see a reduction in inflows, but your outflows into your spending account may stay relatively flat. But what you saved on is potentially not having to pay an extra mortgage payment for childcare. And again, you can do the math there. The other side of this is that as your children get older, things start to become a little bit more expensive, whether it's clothing, shoes, they're consuming more food, right? So your grocery bill is just going to organically go up.
Summer camps, sports, all of the above,
activities, right? If both spouses are working full time year round, well, childcare doesn't go away. If anything, it might become more expensive in the summertime when they're not in school because of all the additional activities. This is where prudence is required. Right? If we're going to be good stewards of our finances and really try to put our dollars to the highest and best use. As our children get older, it becomes more complicated and we need to start having harder conversations, real conversations with our children, because this is where keeping up with the Joneses can come into play. And depending on what your upbringing was like as an individual, that will flow over and impress upon what you want experience-wise for your children. If you were someone who came from a household where stay-at-home mother or parent and primary breadwinner was able to provide more than enough, and you guys got to have a very memorable childhood of activities, being in all different types of sports and activities, going on vacations consistently, and then you become an adult and you get married, and maybe that's not the same outcome, right? Maybe both spouses are required to work, but you're still trying to give your children that exact same lifestyle. That's not a fault of yours. But you may not be in a season of life where you can do it without putting your actual finances at risk. So it's just understanding, but the system remains the same.
The system remains the same, but what I would say is the coordination account and giving you the clarity of what's coming in, what's being captured, what's going out, it illustrates those trade-offs that you're making, right? It illustrates if I want to keep up with the Joneses, my financial situation is suffering because I'm not capturing anything. Whereas without the system, I'm going to keep up with the Joneses. I can't really tell if my financial system is suffering or not because I don't have the clarity to see it.
Yeah. So, I mean, the big takeaway here is understanding that if you're not hitting your mark on a savings component when you're, a young family raising children, today's not your forever. Children will get older, childcare will go away, sports come and go, right? Activities come and go, but there are going to be irregular expenses that need to be accounted for. So what's being moved from the wealth coordination account into your spending account will fluctuate. And just understand you define the experiences that your children want or that you and your spouse want, and it's ultimately up to you to determine what's the best fit, right? And what are you willing to sacrifice today in exchange for what you could experience in the future when you stop working, which I think leads us into the final stage of the different seasons of life.
So from a retirement perspective, I'm no longer working. So money, I still need it to consume it and live off of it. I've been using the system. Let's use that assumption. I've been using the system up to this point, but now I'm not going from person at work, or I'm not receiving my normal paycheck. I'm now living off of my Social Security benefits, my passive income, my portfolio income, my whatever else it is. What's the strategy here? How do things shift from a spending standpoint?
Yeah, I would say that with the system, again, it stays constant. So we've shifted from the first two phases we've discussed, young professional, young family. Now we're in the retiree where we've exited the workforce or preparing for the exit of the workforce. Well, up to this point, all of our income sources have been going into that wealth coordination account. Again, $18,000 flowing in each month, $13,000 being used to spend, $5,000 left over. One thing we haven't harped on because it's really not a focus of the conversation today is that some of that $5,000 is going to be invested. It's going to be focused on accumulating wealth, right? The first two phases are the wealth accumulation phase. Well, now that we're a retiree, we're transitioning into the spending phase, the distribution phase, with a hyper focus on creating sustainable income. Well, that wealth coordination account still has a purpose in your cash flow system. The only difference is that it's not being funded from your working efforts or human capital. It's going to be funded from your assets, right? Maybe Social Security, maybe a pension. Any income source that you've defined in retirement with your financial advisor, or if you're a DIYer yourself, all of that is still going to flow into that wealth coordination account. But now we are hyper focused on your predictable monthly living expenses. Do you still have a mortgage? Do you have a car payment? What are your health insurance premiums if you're paying for something, if you retired early before Medicare kicks in? Do you have life insurance still? Do you have long-term care insurance? Again, these are going to be your predictable expenses, but you still have to be prepared for the unknown one-time large expenses, which are typically going to be in the realm from what we see, needing to replace a car from a reliability standpoint, potentially one-time or recurring large medical expenses if your health is starting to deteriorate or you have a physical accident. And so now it's just a matter of honing in on, well, what can I spend reasonably without completely depleting the engine of wealth that I've accumulated over my working career that's providing my source of income for me.
And I think this is where the system really steps in and shines, as it kind of is the cap of the entire approach here. Is, I would say, the primary question that, Michael, you and I get when we're speaking to a pre-retiree or retiree: do I have enough? Can I retire? Or when can I retire? And having a true, organized, consistent system in place makes it much easier for not only the client, but the advisor and client together to determine how much do we need, when can we retire, what is that going to look like? Because the true income need is likely already going to be defined by how the system is operating. If we use our same example before, let's assume nothing has changed over the last 15 or 20 years. Clients used to generating 18. They're used to receiving 13 and capturing the 5. Well, what you and I know together, and we can share with the client, is, well, 13,000 is our real bogey here. If your income sources can produce $13,000, comfortably, confidently, without risk of running out, in theory, you could retire as long as the right pieces are in place behind the scenes to produce that income. Now, if the resources are not enough to reduce the income, right, then the question is, well, once we retire, is the output going to adjust? Is our lifestyle going to pare back slightly? Is our expenses going to fall off our plate that we're no longer paying for? Or maybe vice versa. Is our income going to increase? Hey, I'm going to live the same lifestyle that I'm living today, but I actually want to spend an extra $2,000 a month traveling. Right? Okay, well, can our portfolio provide enough income rather than for $13,000 a month, $15,000 a month? Now, where this system also shines, and it depends on the client, not everyone finds themselves in this situation, is most retiree clients have some level of variable income from their portfolio because the market is not guaranteed and returns are not guaranteed. But there are instances where additional income or additional returns may flow into a retiree's world based on their portfolio. That additional return can be captured in the same coordination account. So let's say as an example, me as the retiree, my portfolio is producing $13,000 a month into the coordination account. I'm sending myself $13,000 a month. My portfolio produces it. I send it to myself. I have one big dividend month as an example, or I have one big return month. My portfolio is now sending me $20,000 that month. Well, I've got $20,000 going into the coordination account, $13,000 coming out. I've now got a surplus. Now that surplus or that captured dollars, in the previous two phases, the goal was invest it, right? How do I put it somewhere to provide for me later? Now that I'm retired, the goal is I've got $7,000 surplus or excess beyond my plan. In theory, it's spend it, right? I'm going to spend it on myself. I'm going to spend it helping somebody else in my life that's important to me. I'm going to spend it or give it away to somebody else or a charity that's important to me. It provides more clarity on here's what I need, here's the excess that I can have the more permission to actually spend.
And I think that's the powerful piece, right? And through all these phases, the focus somewhat changes. But the system, again, you cannot harp on it enough, stays the same. So what's helpful is that you're not having to go back and recreate the wheel through these various phases of life. The system remains the same. The only difference is the inputs of where is the inflow coming from, the amount of outflow that's going towards lifestyle, whether it's going up or going down, to now saying, okay, well, am I taking the excess and investing it, or am I taking the excess and sitting on it for what if moments? So again, I think the big thing here is that understanding that the best budgets will grow with you over your lifetime. The system will help you or should help you find the success with the automation and being able to just capture excess along the way.
So Michael, I'll ask you one tough question. How do we use this system? How does this system apply from a phase perspective, right? Young professional, mid-career professional, retiree. Now, here's the tough question. When you get the how much should a family be spending? How much should I be budgeting? How much is enough? How much is not enough? Talk to me more about how you have those conversations with people, knowing that there's no right answer because everyone's going to look different.
Yeah, I would say this is where budgeting becomes more about empowering the family or individual instead of restricting them. Again, budgeting should not be a lot like dieting. I mean, there is a certain, talking head in the media that thinks that you should only live off rice and beans and stay at home and not do anything until you've completely eliminated all your debt and you're putting, 10%, 15% towards your retirement. That's a bold strategy, Cotton, and I think that it really limits enjoyment of life. So if it's about empowering, I think we have to ask ourselves, or we are in a position to be able to ask our clients, what matters most to you in your family? Where do you want your money to actually go from a meaningful perspective? And what do you want your money to actually accomplish, right? Like those are the big questions that you have to be able to answer. If it's a matter of making memories, like that's what's most impactful for you, great. Let's incorporate that into the budget, into your financial plan. If you want your money to be going to charities because of, you have a philanthropic heart and you want to be able to help the least among you, great. Let's build it into the budget and let's figure out how we can maintain that from a consistency perspective. If it's a matter of being able to fund a future retirement where you and your spouse are not creating a financial burden on your children, great. That's what we want our money to accomplish. But if we're not building that into the budget or into the cash flow system, how can you account for it? So again, travel is usually something that is very meaningful for people. We're taking vacations. You shouldn't feel bad about taking a vacation. So again, if travel matters, budget for the travel. And if it's a matter of creating a separate savings account that the wealth coordination account sends a fixed amount to every month or every pay period, awesome. All you're doing is preceding your annual budget for vacations. If generosity matters, budget that, figure out what you want to give each month, each pay period, each year. We can set aside a side fund for that. Maybe you're going to be putting low basis, highly appreciated stock into a donor advised fund, and that's what you're going to gift out of. If it's important to you, make sure that your budget reflects what your values actually are as a human being, because again, we cannot emphasize financial planning should be humanized. Your budget needs to reflect who you are as an individual, and you shouldn't feel sorry for it unless you're just being maliciously bad with it.
And again, I think that's the power of automation, systematizing, engineering, proper budget. Is if you've systematized or automated everything, it's going to empower you to make decisions rather than discourage you from making decisions that feel big or scary or outside of the norm.
Yeah, and I would say the big takeaway is that a couple things. One, a budget is simply your values written into your bank account, right? Let that sink in. I think that's pretty powerful. The other is that the goal isn't to spend less. The goal is to actually spend with intentionality. We are a purpose-driven podcast. That's what we want for all of our clients, is to just be purpose-driven. Even if we don't understand the purpose that is convicting them, it doesn't matter. It's not our money, right? We're just here to be the Sherpa and help guide them along the way with the better, best options for them to choose from.
Got it. So summary, what do we talk about? Where the challenges with traditional budgeting exists, why it's hard to get started and manage on an ongoing basis. We talked through this concept of paying yourself first, systematizing essentially how money flows through your world. So savings, purpose, the important stuff is automated and spending becomes more of the active decision. We discussed how does this look and feel in different seasons or stages of life. And this really discussed the values-driven or purpose-driven execution of this and how it's going to look different depending on who you are and what's important. So as we begin to wrap things up here, if you have ever thought or said, I'm just bad at budgeting, hopefully today's conversation helped you realize you don't necessarily need more discipline. You just may need a better system.
Right. The best budget isn't the most detailed spreadsheet or the financial app. It's the one you'll actually follow because it fits your life, adapts as your circumstances change, and keeps your financial goals front and center.
And budgeting isn't about saying no to everything, right? It's about saying yes to the things that matter most and are most important for you and your family.
So if you'd like help building a spending plan that's personalized to your goals and lifestyle, we'd love to help. Visit us at www.genesiswealthplanning.com to schedule a complimentary consultation, and let's create a system that works for you, not against you.
And if you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe to Financial Fortitude, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone who thinks they're bad at budgeting. They may just need a new approach. And as always, feel free to submit any questions you have at our Ask Me Anything page, www.genesiswealthplanning.com/AMA.
Until next time, keep building financial fortitude, one intentional dollar at a time.
Are you considering hiring a financial advisor? If so, be sure to listen to episode 1 of Financial Fortitude. In this episode, we discuss the reasons why many people choose to hire a financial advisor and highlight the key qualities you should look for in the financial professional you decide to work with.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not to be construed as tax, legal, or investment advice. Although the information has been gathered from sources believed to be reliable, please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon only when coordinated with individual professional advice. Guest speakers and their firms are not affiliated with or endorsed by Park Avenue Securities, Guardian, or Genesis Wealth Planning LLC, and opinions stated are their own. Guardian, its subsidiaries, agents, and employees do not provide tax, legal, or accounting advice. Consult your tax, legal, or accounting professional regarding your individual situation. All investments and investment strategies contain risk and may lose value. All scenarios and names mentioned herein are purely fictional and have been created solely for educational purposes. Any resemblance to existing situations, persons, or fictional characters is coincidental. The information presented should not be used as the basis for any specific specific investment advice. Michael Acosta and Brady are registered representatives and financial advisors of Park Avenue Securities, LLC, PAS. Securities products and advisory services offered through Park Avenue Securities, member FINRA, SIPC. Financial representatives of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, New York, New York. Park Avenue Securities is a wholly owned subsidiary of Guardian. Consolidated Planning Group, Inc. and Genesis Wealth Planning, LLC are not affiliates or subsidiaries of Park Avenue Securities or Guardian. Michael Acosta's California Insurance License Number 0M50974 and Brady Hemmerly's California Insurance License Number 4353077.
7237198.41, expiration 828.